Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I've just been informed the Minister is on his way from the Ministry, so we expect him to arrive around 9:25. So we'll continue up till that point, and then we will have a lighting of the lamp, which is a traditional ceremony in Sri Lanka. It's very important. So we have 9 names. Those names will be displayed shortly on the screen. And those 9 people will queue up and they will light the lamp. And they won't drop the match because that will burn the carpet. Yeah. It can be slightly hazardous, this process, so I believe there'll be someone to assist. Great. So I was tasked with providing a very quick recap, and it will be quick. It's worth remembering that this meeting was established on the basis of 2 days, with a 3rd day field trip, which is often more important than the other 2 days because of the informal interaction. But the first 2 days essentially were about mapping the landscape of knowledge in the Indus Basin, understanding that landscape, assessing the gaps and trying to think of ways of filling those gaps. So day 1 really took us through a fascinating discussion. 4 countries presented their positions. Or rather their landscapes, their knowledge landscapes. We've got a sense of where those landscapes have peaks and troughs, and where those knowledge landscapes have particular gaps. And some of those challenges mentioned included the issues of economic development and water availability, the uncertainties surrounding climate impact. So, major challenges upstream, but also downstream. Don't forget, coastal sea level rise and intrusion at a coastal margin has many significant impacts on some countries. So, major challenges of uncertainty around climate change. Also, issues of population growth. So, the point being made that, yes, climate change is very important, but population growth is also hugely altering the nature of demand for the resource. So, big challenges around that particular topic area. And then, of course, environmental impacts. So the quality of the resource base in certain areas under enormous stress. And more generally, the risks and insecurities of an uncertain, fragmented knowledge environment make planning, policy making even harder. So in a shared system like the Indus Basin, when your planning and policy making is harder to achieve, the risks of poor decision-making and the impacts on development, and we had also mention of the Sustainable Development Goals, becomes even larger. So, major longer-term development impacts. And the sense in the room, I felt, was very much one of shared understanding that this is a challenge, a desire to take forward more shared knowledge development, but also more knowledge sharing of what we have already in the basin and outside the basin, international institutions as well. So a huge sense in the room of the need to engage policymakers and the scientific community more effectively as well. So today isn't just about what to do next, it's also about thinking research is for development in many ways, and finding ways of linking the two. So linking the research community and the policy-making, decision-making communities more effectively. It's not to say that all research is sort of instrumental and should feed policy, because there's also blue skies thinking. There's also research that is more pure research, but it's very important that that link is made. And at least in as far as research is provisioned in such a way that decision makers can decide whether that is an important piece of work that they need to bring into their decision making. So we mapped out that landscape, and Christina led a very good last session where we identified a number of specific areas. Today is really about strengthening our understanding, but taking forward a set of actions. So some of those key takeaways, really, from my side from yesterday, it's that consolidation that's required, the bringing together of existing knowledge, the need to co-generate knowledge. And again, some of those I think those opportunities arising towards the end of the day, particularly in the working groups that sat for almost an hour and 20 minutes around the building, thinking of building on their work, thinking of those initiatives and ideas coming out of those groups around co-development of knowledge, so the co-production in a sense. And that doesn't necessarily just mean across country boundaries, but even within countries. And the sense came out again in the meeting that we can assume this is about fragmented knowledge at a basin level, but it's even fragmented within countries. And the Indus Basin is certainly no exception in that respect. There are many other parts of the world that I've worked in Africa and Asia, where quite often ministries and academic institutions themselves within a country don't have a very good sharing mechanism. So there are many levels to this challenge of sharing knowledge, and I think that was also mentioned yesterday. And there's also a sense maybe that we need to regularize this kind of interaction. I mean, we're certainly not shy of sitting down and talking to each other about these very important issues. There are costs involved. Convening meetings like this can be costly. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. But certainly regularizing this kind of interaction. Maybe also doing it at a national level, building from national interactions into a regional basin level knowledge for policy and practice process would be a useful way forward. So thinking about a system of developing inputs into this kind of knowledge event may be something we want to take forward today. So a knowledge forum and a knowledge forum process becoming part of the regular landscape, if you like, of Indus Basin dialogue at a basin level. And I can tell you one experience I have in the Nile Basin is that they had a series of Nile conferences called the Nile 2002 conferences from 1993 to 2002. So every year they had a conference in a different country, and they weren't always inside the basin, but they had a conference and they brought together scientists and they discussed the range of challenges and the ways of meeting those challenges, kinds of evidence required, and that process was very successful in engendering a sense of shared vision and also engendering a sense of benefit sharing within the basin. So it had a very positive set of impacts on meeting those challenges in the Nile Basin, and perhaps a similar process could be established here, and that may be something to think about today. And then finally, there are existing networks, the Upper Indus Basin Network, obviously, the Indus Forum work, hugely important work, undertaken by, very dedicated, informed individuals and institutions, needs to be strengthened further. I got a sense yesterday, we presented the Indus Basin Knowledge Platform, and IWMI's got this platform, and we're working with knowledge partners to develop it further. But there are many other, platforms and web-based data portals that need also to be part of a broader understanding of the available knowledge and data in the basin. And I think we need to make sure that there's a strong network between all these different elements. So today, it's about action, really. So today, if you look at the agenda, we're seeking 10 actions. At least 10. Don't limit yourself to 10. But 10 actions that we can take forward from this meeting. 10 really important, tangible actions with a process attached, and even maybe budgets attached. Don't forget, there are people in the room here who are interested in funding, potentially, but there are also constituencies of interest around particular activities and particular actions. So today is really about constellations of these interests coming together. We're providing you the space to think through what can be done, and we're also encouraging, as much as possible, actions that are practical and actions that have traction, if you like, that may be embedded in policy processes or relate to a specific challenge area. So, actions that are real world in the sense that they're tackling a challenge and a problem, and they have a means by which to do that. So by the end of the day, we hope to have identified collectively 10 such actions at least. And in the afternoon, there'll be plenty of time to come together in what I would call functional action groups. You know? This is your opportunity to reach out and find those people in the room that you want to work with on a particular challenge. And we certainly encourage a collective approach, right? As far as possible, a broad constituency of people engaged in meeting those challenges and building these sort of action groups. The reason being, you know, if there are 10 action groups, then maybe there's a way of setting up some kind of simple monitoring framework that can check on the progress of those action groups. And if there is another knowledge forum in the coming year, that knowledge forum can then measure success against those 10 actions. So the whole process becomes a little bit more tangible and embedded in decision making. So that's really our goal today. We're going to have the minister arrive, I believe, any minute, and we'll have the lamp lighting. And then we'll have a session where, you know, we actually are inviting decision makers in the room to kind of not to stand up and be counted as such, although they will be counted, certainly to stand up and make clear, you know, as a decision maker, this is our challenge in terms of the knowledge environment, right? We have to make decisions. The theory of the second best, of course, is well known. You know, you often don't have perfect information. You can't make decisions on the basis of perfect information. You have to accept there are limits to what you know. So you have to work accordingly. But certainly that session will be led by Jamal and Najib, will be about the interaction between the policy environment, decision-making environment, and science and science knowledge. So we hope that will be a very active session. And again, trying to build those links between knowledge and decision-making that are very vital to informing change in the Indus Basin. So I think that's pretty much all I'm going to say. I know we still have about 5 minutes till the minister arrives, but maybe I should hand back to the chair, and then if you want to open up for some discussion. Or we continue to as you like. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we can. 5 minutes, minister will come. And we can start the discussion. Then we are waiting. 5 minutes discussion. Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to invite any points from the floor in respect of yesterday's discussions, any thoughts, reflections that the audience may have, any pointers for today. Senator Nisar, is there a microphone?
Okay, please.
We just discussed.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I just understood. We just discussed with Professor Rafik about groundwater stuff, and I think we are missing this very important direction. And it was emphasized and discussed about it yesterday that we need more high-resolution data, some 1 meter resolution data sets or 5 meter resolution data sets. Generally, for all this prediction analysis, we use low-resolution data, something like 90 meter and so on. And this stuff, I think, should be somehow emphasized more and on the part of geodesy. And China has very powerful satellites now and navigation tools like Beidou, Compass, and we don't use in this area. We use mostly American tools and system is based on GPS. But in this area has a lot of new technologies and new radar technologies. We use mostly optical satellites, but new technologies could be very applicable for many applications. I think this new application and new technologies should be somehow emphasized, and these technologies are well supported generally. And I think it will be good to think about these areas. High-resolution data sets for surface and groundwater modeling.
So just to respond to that quickly, so maybe as a functional group, as a way of taking this action forward, you want to convene a group around the best ways of sharing, spatial data or GRACE data or whatever in the basin, and using different sources of information. That's a fantastic action to come out of this meeting, a network that wants to take that forward, yeah.
Still.
Okay. I think Alan and the chair, I think it will be most appropriate when the Honorable Foreign Minister arrives. We also should present to him one point, if you agree. I'll be happy to do that if required. Is that in the context of the SAARC, you see, while we are, Indus is also part of the SAARC in the sense of the Indus River, and the 4 countries are involved. Even though Sri Lanka may not be, because of the SAARC, it can also have impact. So as a foreign minister, he could take up our cause to present to the decision makers at the highest ranking forum to say, here are the scientific and knowledge forums, like in IWMI in Sri Lanka. Why he is speaking? Because IWMI is based in Sri Lanka, and you hosted this Indus Basin Knowledge Forum, which he attended, and he could be given a brief by you, prepare a brief, give it to him, which could go to the highest ranking forum. I think that will greatly help all the countries, because this is not the only forum. We have other basins, which is the other 2 being Ganges and Brahmaputra in East Pakistan, in Bangladesh, and also the other one, the main artery of river in India. So I think these 4 basins could be communicated to him in the form of paper also, which he could forward it. That's the point I thought we could utilize this session to communicate via the SAARC, and through the SCO, we could go to communicate with the Central Asian, India, and Pakistan leadership, Afghanistan leadership on that forum. So these are different forums. We should not miss the opportunity of connecting with the top-ranking decision makers. Thank you.
So, thank you. I'm my point, because from last yesterday we have discussed too much about the climate change and their impacts, and what their impacts. Definitely, the flood is one of them, and the life of the glacier. But we have, I didn't see any study or any work on the likely earthquake. Yesterday, I have also pointed out this question, that there is a huge impact of even the earthquake that is generating, because that area mostly in the built up high major earthquake belt, Hindu Kush and Himalaya, so that's all as so because if they shake 1,000 kilometer to fill the area, so it definitely shake that area of the glacier, which is very close to them. And when it shakes so much, so their bending force, definitely that is also as likely the population has impact over these climate change, over the glaciers and some other. So similarly, the earthquake, because that is nobody has worked on that. So what's the impact on that? So I think this. And second is my point of view is the most worst impact of the climate, that is in terms of the floods and droughts. And there is yesterday also that was coming to the point, for that purpose, the flood forecast that is play a very important role. But since most of the area, if we look to the Himalaya and the Indus Basin, so that mostly the country that is trans-boundaries, that is associated with their watershed area that is coming to the other areas. So for that purpose, I think there may be. Thank you.
I'm honorable to introduce our ministers, Archana Saruman. Please please stand up and national anthem. Invited ministers to give us nine names. Okay. Young. Beer Young. Young. Aaron and Ontala Alam, Mohammad Fazi, Nisa Malone, Archana Saruman,
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to be here. I want to thank the International Water Management Institute for the invitation extended to me to serve as a guest of honor at this important forum. Climate changes continues to have significant impact on limited, shared water resources across the globe. The Indus Basin is one such key resource impacting on Afghanistan, China, India, and Pakistan, and some 300 million people that live within the basin boundaries. Its impact also extends beyond these boundaries to those that benefit from the basin resources for energy and food. According to UN Sustainable Development Goals statistics, water scarcity affects 40% of the world's population and is expected to rise. Over 1.7 billion people are currently living in the river basins where water use exceeds recharge. The Sustainable Development Goal 6, which relates to water and sanitation, recognizes that sustainability, managing water requirements, and addressing a range of issues such as water quality and wastewater, water use and scarcity, water resource management, and ecosystems. Particularly targets under the Sustainable Development Goal 6 include protecting and restoring water-related ecosystems, including mountains, forests, wetlands, rivers, aquifers, and lakes by 2020, and implementing integrated water resources management at all levels, including the thorough transboundary cooperation as appropriate by 2030. The relevance of water cuts across several other sustainable development goals, as well as dealing with the climate action, affordable and clean energy, poverty, hunger, life below water, good health and well-being, sustainable cities and communities, and even Goal 17 in building partnership for realization of all sustainable development goals. It is in this context that the Indus Basin Knowledge Forum, which you have convened, assumes greater significance. Understanding the nature of the existing knowledge related to development challenges in the Indus Basin is critical in order for policymakers to formulate evidence-based policies which will identify gaps and provide responses that address real issues. The relationship between scientific evidence and effective policy development and implementation can be enhanced if greater emphasis is placed in expanding knowledge frontiers. As I understand, it is this what the forum intends to do. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps there is no better location than Sri Lanka where a discussion on the management of water resources can take place. I would encourage you to delve in Sri Lanka's history during your time here. There you will learn of the archaeological remains of the great kingdoms of Anuradhapura and Polonnaruwa, which can still be found in the island's dry zone. The remains of the magnificent secular and the religious monuments and the stupendous irrigation works speak volumes of the intricate water management systems which were established during the ancient times. These irrigation works mainly consisting of reservoirs called tanks and are still in use. The finest example of the ingenuity of Sri Lanka irrigation engineering is the invention of the Bisokotua, meaning the Queen's Enclosure, in the 3rd century BC. Bisokotua is the equivalent of the modern valve pit which operates in the regulation of the outward flow of water. Henry Parker, Irrigation Department, British Ceylon, narrated that the building these Bisokotuas, the ancient Sri Lanka engineers established a claim to be considered as the inventors of the valve pit more than 2,100 years ago. Sir Emerson Tennant, 1843 to 1850, a colonial secretary, said that this of the great hydraulic civilization of the ancient Sri Lanka, and I quote, "The stupendous ruins of the reservoirs are the proudest monuments which remain of the former greatness of the country. Excepting the exaggerated dimensions of the Lake Moeris in central Egypt and the mysterious basin of Al Aram, the bursting of whose embankment devastated the Arabian city of Marib, no similar constructions formed by any race, whether ancient or modern, exceed in the colossal magnitude the stupendous tanks in Ceylon." unquote. Sri Lanka is a country which brings a unique perspective on the many challenges facing managers and the users of water. In spite of the perception that Sri Lanka is highly water abundant, like in the Indus Basin, water availability is hugely variable in both times, across seasons, and especially from the wetter south to drier north. Sri Lanka has for centuries, therefore, had to master the art of evening out the flows and harnessing resources for agriculture production and human consumption. And in more recent years, for hydropower production too. However, challenges of ensuring water quality, managing pressures on groundwater, and dealing with the devastation impacts of floods still persist. Ladies and gentlemen, the Indus Basin Knowledge Platform, which was spearheaded by the IWMI based in Sri Lanka, aims to bridge the science policy interface by bridging together scientific material from multiple disciplines as well as policy documents and the legal frameworks in effect at the regional to subnational level on the Indus Basin. As I understand, it's this meeting which is about supporting deeper understandings of the knowledge landscape in the Indus Basin, a critical part of South Asia's geography, identifying ways of strengthening this landscape and building greater collaboration around future knowledge development. So this knowledge forum is about convening problem solvers to tackle key development challenges such as Sri Lanka faces, but at much greater scale in the case in this Indus Basin. We hope that of the deliberations can come ideas, solutions, and suggestions for ways of overcoming these management challenges at all levels. We hope as hosts that Sri Lanka may also benefit and contribute to these important outputs, and that the spirit of collective endeavor bridges not just communities of scientists, but also the communities in the region sharing their challenges. Sri Lanka remains a steadfast friend of all those engaged in this most important task and remains committed to the sharing of the best of our indigenous and scientific knowledge to help to achieve your ends. IWMI, as a key international institution dedicated to the science of water management and development and hosted here in Sri Lanka, can remain critical conduit for such sharing and co-knowledge production. We also support the role of the other regional and international institutions in the endeavors to strengthen water management and development in the South Asian region, and note that the high level of participation in this meeting with gratitude. Above all, we must continue to focus our efforts on successful outcomes for the poorest and the most vulnerable, subject to climate change impacts and increasing pressures on land and water resources in the basin. Sri Lanka also remains firmly committed to the Paris Agreement on climate change and the implementation of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you deliberations all success, and I do hope you will enjoy your every moment in Sri Lanka. As the Foreign Minister, I would look forward to taking the opportunity, as this is a very technical subject, and I thought it would be better speaking something which is prepared text rather than speak off the cuff on things that I don't know, but I certainly see the importance of it. And as I was being walked in, I said that this is the opportunity for Sri Lanka to play an interceding role and ensuring the knowledge of yours, which is unknown to us, of course with our rich historical knowledge that we have possessed, to be transferred to one another and able to come with something which is on a win-win for the region. We are ready, willing and able as a government to give all the support that is there for IWMI, who has been doing a yeoman service in Sri Lanka. And I hope that there will be a catalyst that will be able to use their knowledge, their presence in Sri Lanka, and with the collaboration of the government to go further. All I could basically mention as a former Minister of Finance, that we are having a chronic situation. We are having floods in the on the southern part of Sri Lanka and droughts in the northern part. Now we have enough of water, but we can't share the waters in a meaningful way. Tell us as to how we can do this. The government loses almost 700 to 800 million on areas of floods and devastation. We just came through one of the worst of its devastated floods that just took place about 5 or 6 weeks ago, and we are still recovering from that. So I'm sure with your knowledge, we'll be able to improve ourselves and able to not only provide a permanent solution, but also maximize the limited resources that are there and fast dwindling. So I wouldn't want to take further time, but wish your meetings and deliberations all the very best. And I hope you have a pleasant stay in Sri Lanka. I hope that this is not your first visit to Sri Lanka, but if it is the first, ensure that there are many. Yes, I'm made to understand the first, so make it the first of many to come and make this your natural home while you can have your permanent home somewhere else. Thank you and wish you a pleasant stay. Thank you.
Can we all convene at the front for a group photo, please?
Photo,
yeah. Yes, everyone,
Everyone,
including
everyone,
Senator
come.
Issa. I think we'll stand.
Stand a little bit better.
I don't think all can get on the stage.
We're going to use this exit and go outside, actually.
Outside.
Yeah. Come round.
All right, I'll manage with that. I'll start it first. After that,
Discussion for this.
we'll get the PowerPoint, please.
Okay, so welcome back from that important interlude. Thank you. So now we're moving into session 1. Our chair is helping to sort out the computers. This is an interactive session, really. We're talking about decision makers and knowledge and the connections. So the facilitation is actually going to be led by Dalal Najib, and I will play a support role, although you'll see my name is in the agenda. And we want decision maker perspectives. We're really keen on getting their ideas and their sense of knowledge challenges as a decision maker, not as a researcher, not thinking, what methods do I need to put together? What is my case study sample? You know, how am I going to write up this huge volume of research data? No, we're thinking about decision makers who want to have those nuggets of information that help them chart a course through very complex, often wicked problems that they need to address. Complex issues, multi-dimensional problems. So we're going to ask for an element of self-identification. We're not going to put you on the spot, but we're certainly going to ask you to speak up, because decision makers, whatever kinds of decisions you're making, you know, are a critical part of this audience and a critical part of the broader agenda of strengthening the knowledge environment. So without saying anything else, I shall hand over to Dalal, and she's just waiting for the microphone, and she will take us forward. We'll also, I should say, have a perspective on the media, because the media also plays a very important role, and we're very privileged to have Joydeep Gupta from the Third Pole Project here to help us in that respect. So over to you, Dalal.
Thank you, Alan. Good morning. So first, by show of hand, I'd like the people who identify as decision makers or policy makers to raise their hand. I'm sure you're in the room. You can't hide. Well, I know one right in front of me. I can see him right now, but we have more. Come on. Representatives from ministries? Okay, I see Undala over there. Others from organizations. People who use information, all we've been talking about yesterday, to make decisions. One more? Okay, great. So we have 3. What? More, okay, very good. So I'll pass you the mic. Please, can you share with us what type of information you need to make effective decision making when it comes to water resources management? And we also have 3 questions: what, how, and when. What kind of information you need, how you want it delivered, and what's the timing? When do you need it? There is sometimes a saying that says, better be early and wrong than late and right. I don't know if that's true, but we understand that decision makers need to make decisions under very time-sensitive conditions. So I'll pass Jamal.
Actually, son. Thank you very much. My name is Jamal. I'm working with the Administrative Office of President as a water resource and climate change assistant expert. Actually, from my experience, as we are delivering this kind of specific information for the President Office, what we found that almost the scientists they're providing a long report, and the long report is very boring for the policymaker. And what is another interesting for the policymaker is we have to talk with the policymaker based on their own language. If we say, okay, we did apply this kind of method, this kind of formula, it's not interesting for them. What is interesting for them is money. If you say that if you do this thing, you will benefit this amount of money. If you don't do this thing, and you will lose such kind of money. So in most cases, it's very interesting for them to do some cost and benefit analysis from your research. Because you're doing many things, and at the end, just do a cost and benefit analysis, and it's very, very interesting for the policymaker to see that if I implement this research or this method, how much it will benefit my country. So this is very important. And we have to brief this kind of research for them, that this is the input and this is the output. So from my experience is just to do some cost and benefit analysis from your research. And another issue is like most of the time the policymakers and who are at the top management level, they are the management level. They're not the technical people most of the time. And if you do some pilot research to visualize the result for them, it's also very interesting. If we just do some library research, they will trust our result somehow. But if you do some case study and do some pilot project, it's very important for them because they will see the impact. Then they will trust the result as well. So that was some points from my point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jamal. So we have two things that you mentioned: economic incentives, so to have a cost-benefit analysis, and also have a pilot study that proves your point, so show the results that they are effective. We have Mohammad Hassan, right?
Thank you very much. In short, I can say the information should be reliable. And also, as my friend said, the cost associated with any decision and any decision that decision makers make and the impacts of any decision. I mean, the analysis of the report is important for decision maker, and the impacts that any decision may have on the people. That if the decision maker can predict that based on the report and the analysis provided to them, they can make more decision more conveniently. And I think that's it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. One more perspective here. Can you introduce yourself and your institution?
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Sharad Jain. I am from National Institute of Hydrology, which is a research institute in India located at a place called Roorkee. From my perspective, I think 3-4 things will be important in managing water resources of Indus Basin. First of all, we would like to know how much is water availability versus demand. And naturally, demands are likely to be more than water availability. Then what are the gaps and how these gaps can be filled? Now, one of the main consumers of water, we all know, is agriculture. And my view is that large savings in agriculture water use are possible. So I think a decision maker in India would like to know what are the possibilities of saving water in agriculture by several means. This could be modifying the cropping pattern by making use of more water efficient technologies such as sprinkler and drip. And if each of these technologies are adopted, then how much water saving is possible so that the gap between demand and supply can be filled. Second thing is many projects and many cities in Indus Basin are suffering because of sediment. So other information that we would like to know is where from this sediment is coming into the river, what type of watershed treatment measures are possible to reduce sediment inflows to our projects. And since we have limited finances available, how to prioritize our investment in watershed treatment measures. Other important thing would be that once the sediment has entered into the reservoir, what are the ways by which we can allow that sediment to pass through the reservoir, not get stored, and reduce the storage capacity. Then third important thing here is that this basin is subjected to frequent flooding, and we have not been so far able to provide reliable measures to protect our civilizations against flooding. So 2-3 things will be important here. One is we need to develop and implement early flood warning system for the basin so that in sufficient advance time we can forecast the floods and people can be moved to safer location. We also need to see the possibility of constructing storages so that flood waters can be temporarily held in these storages and then released later when the damages are not there. And third thing would be that we need to create flood vulnerability maps to identify the locations which are highly vulnerable to flooding, and then think of providing protection to these areas. And the fourth thing, which was mentioned yesterday also, that groundwater tables are rapidly falling in many parts of Indus Basin, as in other places in South Asia. So we need to identify what are the locations where water tables are falling rapidly and how to regulate our groundwater resources so that it doesn't become a curse. In India, the experience is that at many places where water tables are falling rapidly, besides giving economical challenges, we are also facing health hazards because geogenic sources of pollutants are entering now in our water supply and causing huge burden to our already burdened health care system. So this is something that we also need to take care. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very thorough answer. So just to summarize what you've said, first you said that filling the gap between demand and supply is important. Second, how to prioritize investments in the light of limited resources, especially in what type of sediments you're dealing with, and also dealing with frequent flooding. So developing an early flood warning system, the possibility of constructing storage, and how to build flooding vulnerability maps, and regulating groundwater resources. And also you touched on also the health hazards that are related to this. So a lot of things, and we have another perspective here. Please introduce yourself and your affiliation.
My name is Mohammad Shah from Pakistan. I have the opportunity to work with the policymakers, the decision makers. Whenever we take any technology to the minister or to the secretary, their first question is, what impact this technology is going to take on the society? This is the first and the most. If this technology is very efficient, very useful, we say that it has a very huge potential, they don't believe it. They always ask what it is going to have impact on the society. And secondly, they believe in the science-based evidence. They believe in the practicability of the technology. For example, I had the opportunity to present one of the technology which we have been, PCRW have been able to introduce in Pakistan. That is the growing of rice on beds. Because the rice is, it is always grown on in the standing water. There is a myth that it needs standing water. But we have been able to break this myth. When I presented this technology to our minister, he said, I don't believe it unless I see it. So then we demonstrated this technology on his field. And after seeing the benefits of this technology, now he has become our spokesman. Wherever he goes, he actually referred to this technology. And he also wrote the letter to the Chief Minister of Punjab to include this technology into the production technology of the Agriculture Extension Department. Before that, the Agriculture Extension Department, they were not owning this technology. So the minister, he wrote a letter to this technology, to the Chief Minister to include this technology. Third one is the most important is they don't believe in the scientific jargons. The technology should be simple and stupid so that they can understand it easily. So these are the 3 or 4 things which we must consider while approaching to the policymakers, because they don't believe in the impact factors, they believe in the impact on the society. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, impact on society, evidence-based decision-making, and minimizing scientific jargon. We had 3 perspectives from Afghanistan, India, and Pakistan. We don't have a perspective from China, so I'll gravitate towards the Chinese table over there. And let's see. I'll have a perspective. Excuse me. I need a volunteer, or I'll pick on someone. Okay. The chair? Would you like to contribute? Okay.
I think Professor Su ladies first.
There you go.
In fact, I myself is a researcher, but I worked in the China Meteorological Administration, and we contact frequently with some user for meteorological information is needed. And we know that for example, for Water Resource Ministry, they frequently asked us what might be the precipitation or what might be the temperature looks like in oncoming or forthcoming future half months or half years. So, and we can, of course, provide many different kinds of information, but they mostly concerning the reliability of our project results. So I think the most important thing for our researchers to providing to the decision makers is the confidence level of our research results. And of course, for that already mentioned, we need for some technical issues. I think we need to also do some cost and benefit analysis, and it's very important because sometimes we have some. If you want to for flood protection, etc., and sometimes the technical problem cannot solve everything. So we need to do some cost and benefit analysis first. Yeah.
Thank you. So you touch on 2 of the points that were brought up earlier on reliability by Mohammad Hassan and also cost-benefit analysis by Jamal. Thank you. Do we have time for one more perspective, or shall we move on to the media? I think Undala wanted, she raised her hand over there. Oh, we have one here. Okay.
Thank you. I'm Broman, working with the Ministry of Energy and Water. Based on my experience, I would like to point out some important point, which is really not interesting with the policymakers, is the issue of uncertainties. Because ministers of deputy ministers and policymakers ask you about, suppose, water availability for 2015, what will happen in this river basins and that river basins. But the issue of climate change is a little bit complicated. It is including lots of uncertainties analyses. So the issue of uncertainty analysis or putting this issue with the table of policymakers is not something really interesting. So just they said you have to speak with them concretely. It is not possible for a scientist, because the issue of projection is including lots of uncertainties to consider for the issue of planning and policy making. Thank you.
Thank you. And I was just pinpointed another policymaker from India, Dr. Sharma.
Thank you. I am the Director of Environment, Science and Technology from the state of Himachal Pradesh in India, Archana Saruman. Well, most of the things have been rather echoed by many of the other policymakers who have already stated the same things. We also would like, basically I've said it yesterday also, that we would like to have more data, which presently is on a very coarse level, and so accordingly we get very wider results. So we would like to have certain more local level data available so that we can plan appropriately at the village level, which is the last unit of administration in any country. Secondly, there's another thing which I would just like to quickly mention is that I see that there is very less talk. Primarily, we talk about climate change, but primarily it's on the level of data collection. And I hope that knowledge is much more than just data. We need to have, there is not much attention given to the water, presently since we're talking about water. So water, livelihood, and the gender connect. This nexus actually is not discussed much, and we really need to do more about it. Researchers need to really give us some really affordable, simple, replicable solutions so that we can address these problems, which are the immediate problems. We can work and play with data later on, but basically some very basic data which can actually really help the poor man down. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your insight. We have another. So you mentioned the need for more local data, but also there is much more than data, right? To address the connect between water, livelihood, and gender, for example. Andre?
I'm Andrei Baranik. I'm USAID Regional Environmental Advisor. I just want to remind all the scientists here, there is an instrument and the process which helps decision makers to approve or disapprove any project or program activity. It is called environmental impact assessment. Every single country in the Indus Basin has this mandatory environmental impact assessment procedures, and that's where the scientists can play a major role. There is a venue for public consultations. There is a venue for doing cost-benefit analysis, and you can do environmental impact assessment and the strategy, policy, planning, and project-specific level. I guess you may start thinking about how connecting these dots through this process.
Thank you, Andre. We have, is there someone over there? Oh, right here.
Thank you. I'm Riaz, and my job is not as a decision maker, but I'm information generating, working in generating information generating. There's a number of things that has to be highlighted, but I'm just thinking about one is the important thing that the cross-boundary data, which is very, very important, because there is no any expenditure involved in that, just a policy making. So I highlight this thing that the policy makers who has just to think in the why we are sitting here and why there is the international so much funding is vesting on this, that they should have all the things that are for the human being, for the safety and for the property losses. So why should, and what's the research for what purpose? So that's for the safety of the human being. So why should we not go to the straightforward to that help us for the safety, for the accuracy of the model? So that's the most important thing. Yesterday it was also highlighted. But for the cross-boundary, for the trans-boundary data, hydrometeorological data, or some other such type of the data, so that's the most important thing. Where we are, and it's not issue of the one country, but it's most of the countries that has such type of the issues. Likely a number of the basins that's it's a very simple thing without any expending the money on that, just to make a policy that accurate information that is needed to the downstream country or for the lower riparian. So I think it is, we should have to think about that, and it could be easy. The second is the media information. That media is also, I think that's important. Media?
We will have also a talk by media as well.
Okay. So that is the most important, that because for the model, it's more work. The transboundary data is working more than the accuracy of the model, because you have seen to the if you know the upstream flows, so it's very easy for the downstream, and it's provide a lag time, much more time for the mitigation of such type of the hazards. Because one of the most impact of the climate change, that is the increase the frequency of the floods. And because the rain intensity in a short period that is increasing. So this is that's invite the floods. If the intensity of the rain is increasing in a short period, So that's definitely at the upstream, so that's generate the flood, and that is way forward for that's creating the flood. So my suggestion, proposal, as well as from the day first to till now, that we should at least make a certain invite these to the policy makers that they should think about that in the best interest of the nation and the best interest for the regional cooperation. If this is so, I think it is a great achievement. So thank you.
Thank you. Alan?
Yeah, well, I just want to jump in. What a great segue, because the media are sitting over there. Well, Joydeep is sitting over there, and Joydeep is on the agenda, and Joydeep actually has a very, critical view on how the media plays a role as a broker of knowledge. And that brokerage role, I think, is what you're referring to here. So maybe we want to segue to Joydeep's intervention at this point, because the media absorbs, like policymakers absorb information and knowledge, and in a different way. They don't generate policy, but they generate public knowledge. And most media work is in public, right? So they shape the discourse that affects the way people behave around resources in the basin. So I would suggest we grab that perspective sitting right beside you.
Joydeep? You have a presentation? Or you
No, I don't have it.
Okay.
I told Alan that I was not going to make a presentation, a formal presentation. Thank you. But yes, since yesterday I've been listening to a lot of good stuff and a lot of stuff that I have heard in the past about how journalists are unreliable, about how researchers say something to journalists and something else gets printed, and how therefore they think that they cannot trust journalists and cannot talk to them. I will respond to this in exactly the same way that I respond to very similar comments in very similar conference rooms, is that the journalists are not a monolithic entity. Just as researchers are not, policymakers are not, scientists are not. They cannot be. There are millions of journalists all over the place. So I think your experience, obviously it colors your feelings in future. But to me, there is no objective way to decide which journalist will distort what you are saying and which journalist will not. But there is the best way that I can suggest to you is that if a journalist wants to speak to you, check what he or she has reported in the past. That it's nowadays all available over the net, and that would be the way. Having said this, Alan wanted me to speak a little bit about the media as a knowledge broker. And I'm going to say that what I've heard yesterday and today and what I've known of this project in the past all reinforce my feelings that we are all passing up a very good opportunity to have these very important issues in the public domain and therefore influence policy by putting it out in the public domain. I heard yesterday the country presentation from Afghanistan talk about the per capita water availability forecast in Kabul. If this is published regularly in the Afghan media, especially in the local language Afghan media, I can assure you that you will have far more effect than you have had so far. There is no way that this can be ignored, especially when people living in Kabul read this. Similarly, let's talk about what Professor Jiang Tong spoke yesterday about one zone, one road. Now, this is a situation where he also spoke about precipitation going down in Western Tibet. What I would like to know, and what I think every policymaker in the entire Indus Basin would like to know, is the effect this is going to have on projects such as the Segali Dam in Tibet, the other dams being planned downstream by India, the dam, the high upper Indus cascade that has been planned now and for which a $50 billion agreement has been signed between China and Pakistan. I think every policymaker would like to know the long-term implications of this. This is of serious media interest, and this is of serious interest to just about everybody living in this entire basin. And I think total and absolute transparency in this is the only way that media can play an honest knowledge broker in this, and it's to everybody's benefit. I've been hearing also a lot, and I've heard this in the past for many years, the importance of transboundary data, and I completely agree with the importance of transboundary data. However, I don't think the media is really in a position to change laws in various countries. 3 out of the 4 basin countries have laws that make it illegal to provide live water flow data. So I don't think that's going to happen in a hurry. There are ways around this. There is an enormous amount of satellite data available on this, and water flow data, live water flow data, need not be the only way to do your modeling. You are hydrologists, many of you. You know about this far better than I do, that you don't always need live water flow data to do your modeling. Everything else is available in public. All the meteorological data is available on publicly available websites. So that is available at a transboundary level, and we use it. We have groups of journalists covering this in all the 4 basin countries. And I'm sure IWMI can give you the list of journalists who have been covering this. And I can be reasonably sure that they are honest brokers rather than dishonest brokers of information. I will be very happy to answer questions. At this stage, all I will say is that being with the media probably will make for more cooperative development and more sustainable development in the Indus Basin than keeping the media at arm's length and having a relationship of distrust between them. Thanks.
Thank you, Jodip. Can I follow on just on your presentation? So you mentioned about your relationship of the media with policymakers, so not to keep them at arm's length and to trust them and be transparent. How about the relationship of the media with the researchers? How can they engage and leverage the media to get their knowledge across?
I was talking principally to the researchers. Yes, and we do speak to policymakers, but it's not the policymaker is not my primary source. My primary source is the researcher. Unless the researcher tells me what's going on, how do I know? What do I report? So yes, whatever I've said is primarily aimed at the researchers rather than the policymakers. Of course, we have to speak to the policymakers as well. But it's unless I get that information, what do I write? What do I report? What do I speak to the policymakers about? So that information can come essentially from researchers. And there are problems that we face in talking to researchers. Distrust is one of the things that I spoke about because it's the most critical issue. And there are other issues. Researchers, many of them, quite correctly, want their papers to be published in academic journals first before they go public with it. We have a problem with that. We have a problem with that because the average academic journal takes about a couple of years before they publish, by which time the information is totally outdated as far as the media is concerned. So we try and understand your problems. I think it's important that researchers also try and understand our problems. We deal in news, which by its very definition is something that is new. And that is something that is fresh and something that is different from what's happening right now. So getting a 2-year-old paper is rarely news for us. That becomes a major issue.
Thank you for clarifying. I know we're running against time, but I'd like to open the discussion to the public. We have one intervention from Ali.
As against media, my observations as someone who is heading a think tank are quite distinct. Based on my experience of working with several governments at national and sub-national levels, my experience is that the policymaker tends to be risk averse. They are more conscious about cost factor. They want something cheaper, not terribly expensive. And oftentimes the investments are not based on research, but if it's innovation or technology or transformational change, it comes from donor-funded projects. And typically the mindset in many developing country governments that I've worked with is that the best technology is too sophisticated and the capacities at national, sub-national levels are not sufficient, and therefore go for the second best. And therefore the mediocrity prevails more often than not. And they look for quick fix. This is my 5th point. Instead of looking at long-term investment, that will give a systemic approach. They see how best I can have within my electoral terms of this fiscal year or the other. And therefore, in South Asian context, jugaad technology prevails, which is makeshift jugaad. You will probably not understand. Many countries from India and Pakistan will. Jugaad lagaएं और काम हो जाएगा. It's a quick fix. Now, having said that, what in my observation that the policymaker is approaching us or we engage with them as think tanks, they look at best practices in their own country, in the region or elsewhere. They look for case studies, more systematic and scientific. They look for human stories. They look for short, crisp policy briefs, not opinion pieces that appear in media. They look for killer facts and fact sheets. They look for infographics. And they're quite averse to thick reports that they go on their shelves and then the staff discards them over a period of time. So at least in the country that I come from, there's usually more suspicion about newspaper stories than trust. But this kind of role for think tanks, that space is expanding in the Indus Basin countries, in my experience, in the last couple of decades.
Thank you, Ali. And we, in the discussion, we're talking about what, how, and when. So you touched on the format, the media for conveying knowledge. Can you say how your think tank deals with the timing? At what time do you reach out to policymakers, and at what time do you engage them? At the inception level, at the dissemination, or in between?
This is an excellent question, and actually it's a real-life question now in the South Asian region. Allow me to give you an example. A book is written by a distinguished scholar. It's printed by a distinguished printer. And if it's very good, it finds space in New York Times, and then maybe an event to launch it. Whereas as a think tank, our interaction with the policymaker begins the moment an idea initiates that this or that needs to be done. It begins with a tweet, with social media, and then you begin to interact with beta versions before they are finalized. You're not waiting for the ultimate day when the book will be printed. So the entire value chain of that knowledge product has an interface with the policymakers, and it's a relationship of trust and learning from each other and informing. It becomes an iterative relationship. Then we act as sitting on ivory towers of research or something and go to the policymaker, put it on his table or her table and say, this is the best thing for you to do, take it or leave it. No, it's a process that you begin before you invest a dime. Only when the idea is clear that I want to do this or that work on, let's say, groundwater or whatever, and then you engage with them, and then they guide you also. But very often, because you are systematically and working on full-time basis, their interventions are limited because of their time constraints. They share their what we call abrupt reactions, and you refine and interact with them. Sorry.
So gauging the process from the beginning and fine-tuning as you get the feedback from the policymakers. One more here.
In fact, some things have already been discussed. In fact, the decision makers, I mean the researchers can only influence the research decision makers if the research is according to the problems of the real world. If there are theoretical research, then definitely it cannot appeal the decision makers. And whenever you go to the decision makers, they ask only 2 or 3 things. What is in it, and how it will be implemented, and what benefits we will be getting. These are the 3 questions which the decision maker normally asks. And definitely, in my opinion, these are the genuine questions. For example, in the Pakistan, if we take, according to the Indus Basin systems, the main problem in the Pakistan is that we are having the ample water in 2 or 3 months, and but we are having the very less water. That is not to our requirement for the remaining 9 months. So the researchers should focus how we can deal with the less water in the 9 months, and how we can manage the excessive waters when we are having the floods. In the floods, for example, we face the floods. We face the flood of 2010, 2014, and 15. And the 2010 floods, according to the World Bank reports, we have a loss of about $10 million. So the main problem is there are 2 kinds of things how we can manage the floods. One are the structural measures, and other are the non-structural measures. Regarding the structural measures, definitely how we can have the best levees or the dikes or the embankments or infrastructure. And the non-structural measures includes how we can improve our flood forecasting systems. These are the 2 things still we lack in it. And as regards the droughts, how we can manage when we are having the less water, that is not our requirement. And the other problem is overexploitation of groundwaters. Our researchers normally tells us that on the distributors, the head-rich peoples, they should do like this, and the tail people should do like this. It is very difficult to implement it. So the researchers, whenever they carry out their research, they should also know that how it can be implemented. Then definitely, then it can appeal to the decision makers.
Thank you. I guess we're getting to the end of the session. So we're running out of time, but this has been a very constructive discussion. And please continue this discussion throughout the day. We have got many perspectives that will challenge a lot of the researchers into how to better reach out and convey their message, and what's the most effective way to deliver information that will lead to informed decision-making. So please continue this conversation at the break, but also during lunch, and hopefully you can find better ways to communicate with decision-makers. Thank you.
We'll move to the next chair. Next session.
Oh yeah, we do have it.
No? Okay, please.
So it's Jared Jain.
Sharat Jain. Yeah, Sarah Jain.
And Priyanka.
Priyanka, yeah.
Okay, so can we invite the chair for session 2, Dr. Sharad Jain, National Institute of Hydrology in India, please. Thank you very much. Back of the hall.
Hi, good morning. Now to begin this session, there will be 5 presentations. We already have Dr. Bill Young. I would like to invite Mr. Arif Anwar, Dr. Simon Langman, Dr. Harnish Pritchand. The dais, please. I would request Dr. Bill Young for his presentation. You have 7 minutes, Bill. This session is titled as Innovations at the Science Policy Interface. A very important part of the deliberations that we are going to discuss. Not fully, probably.
Can people hear me? Yes, we can hear me now. Good morning, everybody. I've been given 7 minutes, and that's probably, Sharad's probably just reduced that to 6 minutes, 1 minute of technical time. I have 3 slides to present, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. What I want to show is just give people a bit of information about how to access some online resources that the bank has been putting together, partly through the bank, but partly as a window into a whole lot of other online resources, into remote sensing information, water resources information, GIS and types of things. There's an awful lot in the public domain. This slide here really just shows that all I'm going to talk to is one part of it, which is what you might call a top-down data acquisition, the eye in the sky. But that is complementary. The bottom-up information of on-ground monitoring, water resource observations, the hydromet networks, and on the left, often what we call perhaps data rescue, where there's a lot of information from prior systems that are in paper records and things. The idea of bringing all of these information sources together into integrated and centralized data warehouses or databases that are then delivered through all sorts of different platforms and web portals, mobile applications, and different things. And I'll just show you a little cameos of these, if you like, to give you a flavor and give you, essentially at the end, a couple of web links where you can access some of these things and go and explore for yourself. So the bank has put together a number of ebooks or electronic online books, and I'm just going to show you these, and at the end I'll show you the websites. So this one, for example, covers these things here. You may not quite be able to read the text on data and visualization, spatial platforms, modeling and decision support. And under each of these, there's a whole series of information. If I go across here, there's the one on spatial platforms has many different links here to all sorts of online resources as well as background information. And I'll show you a few of these. We then have a data primer here on all the sorts of free data sets that are available online. I'll show you in a moment a web accessible version of a tool the bank has developed called Spatial Agent. You can download Spatial Agent free for your smartphone, either for Apple or Android or iPad. There is now a web version of it. The web version will only give you access to the water information. The app version, the mobile app version, gives you access to all sorts of information: social data, environmental data, economic data at a country level. There is an ebook here on Earth observations of water resources, which is focused on a lot of the NASA data sets and platforms. And again, each of these links here goes to another page with many, many embedded links. And I won't go through all of them. This is a view of the the online version of Spatial Agent. I've highlighted here the Indus Basin. I can go down here and load up all sorts of different data sets on flooding, on runoff. All of this is publicly available information that you can get through this web browser. And the data sets, this accesses them live. So it accesses them from where they are housed by the data providers. It doesn't try and bring them all together. So this is very much live cloud computing. And the data sets that it will access are being updated all the time. We have another ebook on modelling, and this covers all sorts of different water-related modelling, disaster, flood modelling, groundwater modelling, hydraulic modelling, watershed modelling, integrated and river system modelling, and a whole lot of other things. And behind these links are information on each of these models, and then links out to online resources. There's another ebook here on hydromet, giving you information of all the different types of technologies and equipment that are being used in hydromet. It gives you information about the providers and the technologies here. Many of you will be familiar with using Google Earth as a separate application. Some of you may not know now that Google Earth, if you run it, you can run it in your browser in Google. If you use the Google browser, Google Chrome, you can go in and run Google Earth. And some of the imagery that is here, just check whether I have the internet connection live. Some of the imagery that's available in the online version is an awful lot higher resolution than what you get in the app now and is being updated. So if I go in, for example, to the Eiffel Tower and just fly in there, you can get very, very detailed information. I have a fly-through of the Indus Basin, but I don't think we perhaps have time for this. So the point being that you can get a lot of access quickly to Google Earth stuff through your browser now. The other, some of you may be aware of Google Earth Engine. I had some data sets, but you can go here and add lots and lots of data sets. So this is now like Google Earth, but there are many data sets free and online, and I can go in here and add all sorts of data sets within the Google Earth engine. I can search for places, and I can pull it all together using this cloud computing platform. A few of the other things that are there, there's a global water surface water explorer, which again gives you access to a lot of public information around water. And for those that want a bit of GIS capability without doing all the training, there are now many free online GIS tools. So this is from Esri, the ArcGIS. You can register just for free as a user. There's a whole online community. I've just pulled up here, for example, a mapping people have done of the 2010 flood in the Indus and just loaded that into the GIS. And all of this is available free. And you can explore this, and you can create maps and upload them into the community. So there's an awful lot that you can do for free. If you want to get to the very high resolution data, the 1 meter data, you'll find you'll have to buy that, and that's expensive. But there is a lot of good data to get you started. And then just to promote the Indus Basin Knowledge Platform, which basin specific, is bringing together not just data but a lot of information. So briefly back to these slides, I said I'd give you the website. So if those of you who are interested, I can either distribute these, or you can take a photo with your smartphone off the screen. I've said what these are. Most of these ones that the bank has put together are all on this platform called absolutelydigital.com. Important thing to notice that the behind the backslash, the pointers that go to the different ebooks, either the data primer, NASA, watershed training, they are case sensitive. So you'll see some capitals in there. You do need to use the capitals for these URLs to work. So a lot of information there. Those are 6 different World Bank prepared ebooks. And when people have stopped clicking, I'll give you the second of 2 screens, which are these other ones, which are essentially non-World Bank websites, but with a lot of either access into remote sensing or data sets, spatial platforms, and particularly water resource-focused information. And at the end there, a little bit of information about the World Bank's Spatial Agent application. You can get it for your iPhone at the Apple iStore, and it's just been updated. There's a new version just released a few days ago, or you can get it at the Google Play Store for your Android device. And there's a new beta version at the URL. And that must be 7 minutes.
Yeah?
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Good and crisp presentation. Now I'll invite Dr. Arif Anwar, working with new data environments, Indus Telemetry. Using the discharge also.
Bring it.
Sharing, etc. will, I think, go away.
Good morning. So I'm Arif Anwar and I work for IWMI, and this is just a really small piece of work that we did on the back of this informing change in the Indus Basin. Zeem introduced this yesterday, and really there was a component 3A which is about facilitating interprovincial dialogue. And we took advantage of the fact that we had quite a bit of hardware in the office, and this work that we did is related to interprovincial issues, to really explore. And it's kind of the opposite end of what Bill has just shown. It's really, on the ground monitoring and that sort of thing. It does speak to development investments. This was an investment that Pakistan put in to look at issues around flow measurements between provinces. It was about a $5 or $6 million investment, which is not huge in the context of development investments, but it's still not insubstantial. And it was put in with substantial hope and ambitions and aspirations. I have the quote here from the Federal Minister of Water and Power in 2005. There are certainly substantial expectations. Unfortunately, it hasn't quite delivered for any number of reasons. This is one rather key report from 2012. It's not a wholesome endorsement. But this is recognized as a real issue, and that's why there have been development investments in this area and probably will continue to be development investments and interest. In contrast to the structure you see here, I mean, this is based on technology that was available back in 2002. We piloted something. We called it Indus telemetry as opposed to WAPTA telemetry, as the older version was known. The instrumentation itself is pretty much off-the-shelf kind of thing, high-quality stuff, and I'll show you why in a minute, why we chose this high quality, but nonetheless, fairly off-the-shelf stuff here. In this image, although you probably can't see it, we have a sensor down there and a camera, and then a bit of electronics. One of the key changes we made here, as opposed to the earlier version, is that we just use mobile data communication, as opposed to the satellite dish you saw. And this is considerably cheaper. For this one instrument, the subscription for us is $4 per month. So it really brings down the cost. And we were talking about costs and benefits of technologies a little earlier for policymakers. It also takes advantage of cloud computing. This is very easily available. In our case, it's Microsoft Azure, and we pay $500 per month for this. It has much more capacity than receiving data of one single instrument, but so it can receive considerably more. It's a sort of fixed cost, essentially. But it takes advantage of that technology. And then again, you can communicate that across the internet or the mobile phone network, relatively low cost, at least in Pakistan, to any number of displays. This different version to my computer. But anyways, this is a little video, and it would show. This display is actually in PCRWR offices in Islamabad, and it runs continuously. And you can display this data anywhere. There's a little Raspberry sign there, and that's because, again, it was a technology choice we made. Some of you may be familiar with the Raspberry Pi. It's a really small microcomputer developed in Cambridge, essentially for teaching children computing. But again, a reflection of how powerful computers have become and how accessible. This is a $35 device. And because we do most of the processing, and again, it's a technology decision we took, most of the processing at the cloud server, you can use these small devices to essentially run all your display units. So for $35, you get, and this can be programmed to run any sort of display for your real time. And if we had brought one here, you would have seen it here as well. Now, when you present this to, again, let's say policy or decision makers, they will want to know simply, since you're kind of replacing an analog system, how accurate is it? So here, I've just tried to show you what the error is between this electronic measurement, which is much higher frequency. Manual is expensive. They do it once or an hour at most. This is recording pretty much continuously. And you can see it can reproduce the manual system pretty well, both in terms of depth and discharge. The discharge area is higher, and that's simply for those of you into this sort of technology and stuff. It's the issue with the rating curve function. Now, when you start displaying data, there's this issue of it's real-time or quasi-real-time. Now, it is very expensive to measure data and send it immediately. It is possible, but the computing requirements are quite significant in the communication. So really, realistically speaking, you have to sort of accept a lag time or a latency, a delay between when you measure it and when you actually receive it and can see it. So let me just share with you, and this also gives you a sense of how robust, when you make good choices in your technology, this can be, and still be quite cost-effective. So this first line shows you the delay between, and this has to do with the programming, the delay between when the data is measured and when it is received. You have to read it off the right-hand axis there. The system is programmed to receive data 18 minutes. And that's what you see with most of the data. There are blips. The blips are largely when, for some reason, the communication network fails. And so it fails to send it and has to send it. And then there's one larger blip here, which I'll explain in a minute. That's human error. That's IWMI's, in Pakistan, error slightly. We did something that caused that problem. Again, programming choices. Nighttime, the system we have, unlike the original one, does not take mains power. It runs off solar panels and batteries, and charging has improved dramatically. So you can run this completely autonomous of mains power. But to do that, we make a deliberate decision not to transmit data at night. So at nighttime, the latency increases. And this line you can see that shows that nighttime data is received roughly at about every 6 hours. Nighttime being from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning. Because communication is power hungry. And your mobile phone is actually quite power hungry when you use it, not when it's sort of in standby. The system is designed, and I'll explain the blip, to receive 144 records daytime, 144 record nighttime. And despite the slight drops in communication, there is very little loss of data integrity. The system continues, and this is over 3 months, the last 3 months, that thing, both in the daytime and nighttime. And then very briefly, the reason we have that one abrupt thing is we installed a camera because we wanted to also take pictures twice a day. Didn't program it very well, and it drained the battery. And I think I've run out of time, so I'm going to end there. But you can look at the histogram to see that 90% of all measurements are received within half an hour during daytime, and within 6 hours during nighttime. The point I'm trying to make, I'll just have to go, is that even this kind of technology essentially is accessible. The hardware is still, if you want to make good choices, a bit expensive, but the operational costs are quite low. The skill level is still quite high in running and maintaining, making sure these work. It's work in progress. We'd like to expand this further. Expand in our engagement with the institutions, and we've received considerable positive sort of response to all of this. And then, taking it forward from not just data to information. We heard about this yesterday, and then informed management and decision making. And something that I'm particularly interested in is that should government agencies, and many agencies, procure data or should they procure hardware? That for me is, I think, an important question that really we should consider very carefully. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I've over.
Thank you. We halt here with a possible question to researchers and decision makers, and then I invite now to our next speaker, Dr. Simon Langman from IASA, Integrated Solution for Water, Energy and Land.
Name.
Oh, okay, so, yeah, please go ahead, whatever is the...
Good morning, everyone. Can you see the slides? We have to change it from here. So my name is Mubinuddin Ahmed, and I am working for CSIRO Australia. And today I am going to make a brief presentation of our work which we are doing in Pakistan as a part of STIP program in the Indus Basin. And here, I mean, what we are, it's a bit of transition, you know, like here what we are saying is that what historical information which is available in Pakistan, how we can use is to develop an integrated modeling framework to explore the operational and policy scenarios. Use other laptop.
Would you like to proceed without PPT to save the time? Better to replace the computer.
Okay, so the STIP program, who are not familiar with that, it's a Sustainable Development Investment Portfolio. It's a Australian government initiative, and under that program, like there are 4 projects. There are projects in the Indus Basin, also in the Koshi Basin in Nepal and India. Some work is being done in Bangladesh, and some work has been done in the Burmani-Betani Basin in India. And this work is done in partnership, and there are several partners, and CSIRO is one of them, and the other one is ACIR. We have Vice Farm here. I mean, they are also partner into that, ECMOD, IFC, SAVI, and TAF. So my presentation is largely focusing on the work which CSIRO is doing in collaboration with the Ministry of Water and Power and the Provincial Irrigation Department in Pakistan. And here is a list of, like some of our policy partner and delivery partners, what we are doing in Pakistan. So in consultation with the Ministry of Water and Power and the relevant department, we identified there is a need to have an integrated modeling framework to explore some kind of a operational and management scenarios. And then this schematic diagram shows that where we are focusing in the upper Indus Basin to understand, like the glacier melt and inflow processes. We are modeling the water apportionment accord, that how the water is shared between different provinces and how it is delivered to, different canal commands. We have also done some trend analysis to understand, like how the agricultural water use has changed, how the production has changed, and what does it mean in terms of, like population growth scenarios. And then we looked historical as well as we have done analysis up to 2050. And then this is, like modeling framework, we are aiming that once it's developed, will be used to explore some of the, the scenarios such as, like if Pakistan build more dams upstream of Karbela, and if it is used for the hydropower, what does it mean for the country? And if it is used for the irrigation, what are the implications? So this is some of the work which we have done in the upper Indus. I mean, these are the, like some of the catchment for which we have estimated the snow and glacier melt, and to understand, like how much water is coming there. And then with that, like we have also done a lot of work in consultation with the relevant provincial departments. We had a series of, like discussion with the, like Punjab Irrigation. Bodla Sahib is here, as well as we met Siddiqui Sahib. We had a discussion with the, Sindh Irrigation Department to ensure that we capture the operational rules, because it's not documented, and hence, I mean, it's, like that knowledge exists with few people. So we had a series of interaction with them to capture that information and implement into the, into the modeling framework which we have developed for Pakistan. So what model does, it's basically replicate the 1991 Water Apportionment Accord, and it estimates that how much is the provincial share and how it is, like what are the share at the canal command level. And then, like it also, like simulate, the water demand, raw water demand at a, like level, and then it can be useful for water balance analysis. So in terms of some key result, if you see that, like the upper graph on the left-hand side shows that, like we are pretty much matching, the model is pretty much matching the ITSA water forecast. I mean, what they have estimated in the beginning of the season, we are getting the similar result into that. And this shows the flows at different headworks in Punjab and Sindh. It's pretty good match overall. It's, in terms of NSC, it's pretty good at a, 0.7 at a daily, like level. And then volumetric error at the barrages is generally at that less than 10%. So hence, I mean, we think this model is, is sufficiently good. And now we are in process of, next week we are traveling to Pakistan and having a discussion with the relevant departments to make sure that they check the model again. I mean, if there is any error and issues which we have not incorporated it, to, improve the model and then use it. And then once this model is, and then we have also prepared a detailed report documenting all the operational rules, and how the water is shared and how the decisions are made. And that report will be also shared with the relevant department for their review and the feedback. And once this model is accepted by them, so we will be having a discussion with them to explore what are the management and policy scenario they would like to test using this model. And then, of course, we will be working with them to explore those scenarios. And some of the things in which we are interested is to explore the impact of the climate change on water availability, trying to understand, some of the water sharing scenarios in terms of agriculture, hydropower, and environment under the current and the future climatic conditions, as well as, while considering its, livelihood aspects and the gender aspects over there. And the ultimate aim is that, through this modeling framework, we support the national planning and policy in Pakistan. If you need more information, we have a project website here, and then, you can get the detailed information and the fact sheets and the report, whatever we have done so far, is available there.
presentation on integrated solutions for water, energy and land by IASA, Dr. Simon Langan.
So good morning, everybody. This is a lesson in adaptive management. When I opened discussions with Alan, I was told I had 20 minutes, and now I see him down to 7 minutes, and even the clock's ticking. I don't know what's happening. So what I want you to do, I just want you to stay with me and stay with the headlines of this. What I'm really after is your engagement. I come from a systems analysis institute. And systems, really nice, introduced by Bill. So think of the Indus within the globe. Think about the drivers, the pressures, and where we're trying to get to. And what I'm just trying to say to you is please get involved, and I'll try and provide that context of where our work is coming from. So we talk about water, but in fact it's who uses water and what water resources we have. So it's that balance between demand and supply, and of course that has a geography to it. And it has a sectoral interest to it. So if you like, this is a diagnosis of where we are now, who uses water and where do they use water. But what is happening in the future? So if we start to go from the globe, let's move into Asia. And what is going to happen? Well, if we look at society, where are we going to use water? Well, its population are going to use that water to meet their food requirements, to meet their energy requirements. So here are 3 shared socioeconomic pathways developed under the IPCC, and you can think about how many people, so you can take the top one, SSP3, rivalry scenario, which does not look good. If you take the middle of the road, or indeed SSP1 towards sustainability, then what you see is a peak in population about 2050, and then it starts to decline. But importantly, they happen at different points. And if we look at Asia, it's not just the population increase. In fact, it's that as those economies develop, that spending power, that development, means a shift towards how we use our water, so a shift from agriculture towards more industry and a higher domestic. Yet we've got the same, or a changing, variable water resource. So we need to think, where are we going to, and how are we going to get there? So there, under the 3 scenarios on the graph, you can see they all show an increase in the water demand. But increasingly on the right-hand side, if you see that, we say at the moment that agriculture dominates. It uses about 70 to 80% of our water. But in the future, there's a shift away from agriculture as those economies develop towards a more industry underpinned society. So that change in how we use the water and where we use the water is fundamental. So thinking about water resource planning and water use planning. So can we develop this? And what I'm trying to do is set the scene to say we need to downscale from global to the region, into the Indus Basin, and into the riparian countries. Okay, so a number of times over the last day and a half, we've heard about groundwater. So if we look at groundwater as a first approximation, and this isn't a result from one model, this is a result of an ensemble of models. And what they're trying to say is if we look at India, Pakistan, China, then they're changing their water withdrawals over time. You can see comparing the left and the right. And indeed, they're actually abstracting more than is being recharged. So unsustainable use of that groundwater. So again, can we unpack that at a smaller scale and just think about what that tells us in terms of resource availability, resource demand, and how we're utilizing it? Again, in the discussions have come up extreme events. So again, how will society cope with increased incidents of droughts and floods? Who are vulnerable, and what can we do about adaptation in terms of livelihoods, in terms of society, and indeed in terms of ecosystem functioning? So how do we put all of that together? So it's not just the means, it's actually looking at those extremes. And then we talk about water scarcity. So here again, the regional picture, where areas are without water scarcity. Some areas do not currently have water scarcity, but are rapidly moving to that because of that change in the resource availability and the demand for that water resources. So can we put that together in terms of modeling into the future? And what do those scenarios look like? And again, when we downscale from the region to what's actually happening. So importantly, okay, we've got a diagnosis, but what can we do about solutions? So let's move into solution space. So you can see there the line depicting water stress under business as usual. More and more of the population within the globe, within the region, moving into a water stress situation in the future. So can we think about reducing that demand, and how do we reduce that demand? So we could think about hard policies. Can we increase the storage area? Can we reduce from flood irrigation to furrow irrigation to drip irrigation? Or actually, what happens if we invest in capacity? What happens if we don't think about an increase of 9 billion, but move it down to 8.5 billion through building education, particularly for women? So how do we put all of that together? And of course, so what you could think about is resource availability. Do we have enough resources? What's the demand? And again, as a global system, we're not just producing food for our own country. The third option is to trade. And again, what you see here, a very elegant diagram, but what it shows you is India and Pakistan and the USA exporting water in embodied water. So again, is this the right use of water? Are we producing the right goods, using the right water, the right energy, moving into the future? And of course, then it moves into water, energy, and food. So you've got a stock of land, you've got a stock of water. What do you do with those stocks, and how do they interact? So you need energy to pump up water for irrigation. You need to understand those interlinkages. In terms of governance, do you work for a Ministry of Environment? Do you work for a Ministry of Water, Ministry of Agriculture? We need to get those ministries and people talking together to think about how are we going to use our water and land. Do we use land to produce biofuels? Do we use land to produce charcoal? Do we use land to produce food? Or where are people going to live? So again, understanding those synergies and trade-offs moving to the future. So EASA has a set of integrated assessment models that look at energy supply, energy demand. We look at environmental services through the Globia model, and then we've developed a community water model and a hydroeconomic model. So using those models, we can start to look at the synergies and interactions between where we use that resource and what do we use it for, and what are the synergies and what are the trade-offs. And at the moment, those models are working at the global and the regional scale. But through this Global Environment Facility funded project, we've got 2 case studies, one in the Zambezi and the second one in the Indus. And my call is really, can we engage with you as stakeholders? What do you want to know if you're a decision maker? What are the pinch points? What are the opportunities? And what are the constraints? And if you're a researcher, come and work with us, please, and help us develop these scenarios. As Mobin was saying, let's develop these scenarios, let's share the data, and let's integrate this down to the smaller scale. So we have a set of drivers, the processes, impact and resources. And just trying to take that forward, final 3 slides. I think the clock started before I did. So we can look at food and think about this not as a homogeneous landscape, but what do people eat, where do they eat it, and where is it produced? And that idea of production and consumption, building that in. So we're building this database for the riparian countries. And again here, where are the potential trade-offs? Where are the synergies, and how can they be managed? So building into what are those potential solutions going into the future? Penultimate slide. So these are the type of outputs we have that we'd like to share, we'd like to co-develop with you. And like I say, please come and get involved. Let's speak about what your needs are as researchers, as decision makers, and let's try and co-develop the scenarios into the future and the underpinning data where that might take us. So thank you.
That brings us to the last presentation of this session by Dr. Harnish Pitchan on Indus glaciers.
So Alan very kindly invited me to talk about innovations in acquiring, sharing, and using Indus knowledge. But I quite quickly realized that I was not actually all that well qualified to talk about that, because as a glaciologist from the British Antarctic Survey, I'm more used to looking at glaciers and ice sheets in the polar regions, and also I'm not from this region. So I thought what I'd do instead was to talk about my experiences of acquiring, sharing, using the Indus in the Indus knowledge landscape from the outside, and in particular trying to understand the role of glaciers in high mountain Asian hydrology. And those experiences led me to this study, which I just published a few weeks ago. And the question that was driving this study was, why do Asia's glaciers matter? And I very rapidly realized that when you look at the distribution of the glaciers and the population there, we see the Indus, the glaciers in black. There's a very large population in close proximity to a very large extent of glacier ice in the Indus. And when you put in on top of that the distribution of the new planned and existing hydropower infrastructure, you see a very clear pattern where the hydropower is particularly closely squeezed in up against those glaciers. And that's an enormous investment in hydropower capacity. What we see in that picture there is about equivalent in electricity generation capacity to a large European economy. And of course, I also realized that the glacier role in this system is in particular the lower picture there through the summer. So through the seasonal snowpack will melt off from the winter, and what you're left with is that ice melting away through the summer and keeping the rivers flowing. And I realized, it occurred to me that if the glaciers are most important through the summer, then they're even more important in droughts. So I focused on droughts. Here's a slide showing the precipitation history of the Indus Basin in red. And this is 1951 to 2007. And over there on the right, in 2002, you can see the driest year in that record. It was about 25% below the average amount of precipitation for the basin. And that class as an extreme drought. And you can see what's interesting is it follows 2001 and 2000, 3 consecutive years of extreme drought in the Indus. And of course, that doesn't happen in isolation. We have trends going on in the background. So if we look at a map here of water stress, a lot of the Indus Basin is extremely highly stressed. About 95% of the available water is already used. Population is also growing. So back in when those droughts occurred previously, around about 2000, population in Pakistan, 144 million. Now, if the same droughts occurred, there are about 50 million more people who are trying to share that resource, about 200 million. And the third factor, particularly in the Indus, is that makes the Indus vulnerable to drought is an economic factor. So the International Monetary Fund identified that a lot of Pakistan's farmland is irrigated and that the water is vastly underpriced. And this underpricing means that it's very vulnerable to price shocks. And so the thinking there is that if the water is a scarce resource and it's insufficient, then people will be driven to the black market where the prices will be very much higher. They may not be able to afford those water prices. And these price shocks are actually potentially an existential threat to governments and societies in the region. They can drive uncontrolled population migrations, profound social instability, state collapse, or interstate conflict, according to the World Economic Forum. Or to put it more succinctly, as my colleague at Cambridge University did, no governments can survive water riots. So the question then is how, so we see there that the Indus is particularly vulnerable to drought, but we also have seen that the glaciers can help, and they're most valuable during droughts. So the question is, how much do the Indus glaciers help? So this slide here, the pie charts, what I've done is I've looked at the water inputs, this is for an average year, to the catchments of all of those dams that I showed in the first earlier one. And the pale blue part there shows the precipitation inputs, and the dark blue parts show the glacier melt inputs. And so in an average year, we can see up in the upper Indus that there is perhaps about a quarter to a third of the inputs into those dam catchments. But that changes this slide shows the peak month in the summer in the driest year on record for each of those basins. And so this is when the glaciers are absolutely at their most important. And you can see that now in the upper Indus, they were talking about 3/4 of the available water supply going into those dam catchment is coming from glacier melt. And even all the way down in the lower Indus, that's about 1/3. If you look over in the Owl, it's about 100% of the water in those peak drought summer months is coming from glacier melt. And if we put the collapse down into actual geographic locations, we can see very clearly that those very important glacier melt sources are flowing across the contested borders, particularly through Kashmir. So if we look at the numbers, what that volume of water means for the Indus, it's sufficient to support about 70 million people in the Indus Basin. And just for the Tarbela hydropower scheme, that's about $250 million worth a year of electricity. And so you can imagine scaling that up over the whole basin, and it's potentially billions of dollars worth of electricity per year coming from the glacier meltwater. And perhaps more importantly, in drought summers, the glacier meltwater dominates the river water supplies. And so in that way, the glaciers help to protect Indus society and governments from those crises that come during the peak water stress in drought summers. Now, I said I'd talk about the knowledge landscape. These are all the data sets that I used for that study. And the important point here is that these are all freely available to download or available on request to anybody. I didn't have to generate my own data or to access controversial data sets. And I used a freely available SWOT hydrology tool. But I'd like to argue that this can only get us so far. These free data sets can only get us so far, particularly if we're interested in predicting the change into the future. And that's because the uncertainties in a lot of these data sets are very large. And I would argue that new field data are needed. And in particular, two areas. One being in improving the high-resolution, high-altitude mountain climate models, and particularly in regard to precipitation. And I think for that we need greater weather observations at high altitude. And the second thing is in glacier ice volume measurements, where we need to do field survey to know how long our glaciers can last. And I'd argue we'd preferably do that from the air rather than on the ground, because that's very hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we end the presentations, and now we have further bus group formation and discussion, and Flip Wester will facilitate. Can I invite Flip Wester for view of very short time available? We have extended the time for this session till 11:45. So we'll continue till 11:45, and then we'll have tea and coffee break.
I think it's on, yeah? Okay. Hello. So this was the final building block session. So recall yesterday we were discussing the knowledge landscape and hearing about knowledge initiatives, country perspectives. And then today we've had these presentations. So after the coffee break, we'll be starting a session to think around these 10 key actions, or 10 things that we want to take forward. And we'll have the whole afternoon to work on that. The reason I stress that is we're short on time now. I'm okay for coffee because I snuck out and had one secretly. But maybe most of you were being polite and stayed in the room, might be wanting some coffee and tea. So the reason I'm stressing this brought up a lot, and I can imagine there's a lot of questions and there's a lot of excitement and ideas and things you want to reflect on. But we'll have a lot of time after the coffee break and most of the afternoon to further explore these innovations, plus a whole range of other things we've been hearing yesterday and this morning. So without giving away too much about the way we want to facilitate and structure the afternoon session and the session before lunch, is we will be asking champions, issue champions. So maybe someone like Simon, who has already made that invitation, please come and talk to me, and let's see how we can do this integrated assessment modeling. So we'll be looking for issue champions who want to take specific things forward, going forward in the future. So I'm stressing that if any of these panelists, all the other panelists, and any of you really have something that you want to talk about and plan and see how can we take this forward, there will be 5 more hours of that, right? So with that, and also for sake of time, what I suggest here is just to take maybe not Q&A, not questions and answers, because I think there's a lot of detail in there that if we open that up for discussion, then we'll be here after lunch. But the innovations you're hearing, so are you, based on what was presented, the scope you see moving forward for the knowledge landscape in the Indus? So I'm asking you to abstract a little bit and maybe take 2 or 3 reflections on that, or things you find exciting, or something that you feel, yes, this would be really interesting to take forward. So let's just take around, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 reflections. I see 2 already. That's 2 men, 4 men. Okay, I need 2 women to round it out here. Okay, 1. So that's 6 already. So I'll start with. Are you a woman? Okay. Okay, so I'll start with Anamika. And as Andala says, crisp, nice and short and crisp. So crisp means 30 seconds. And your name and affiliation, just so we all know who's talking.
Thank you. I'm Anamika. So I wanted to actually understand that this session is basically about science policy. Sorry, I'm going to be a little critical, because what I see is a lot of science here, but somewhere I feel what is missing is understanding the policies, the policy making, what drives cooperation. Is it all about data? Because I think data is only one aspect of cooperation. So what I see, and this is what my insight from this forum is, that I still feel that this forum has to be much more interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. We need people who studies international relations, who studies politics, who studies power, to really understand that how can we make them understand that this data sharing is important, and strike where we need to strike so that this data sharing can happen.
Excellent point. Demand-driven research. Shakil?
Yeah, I had a question for the Mubin. I mean, about how well the Indus Water Accord is working, because there are canals which are crossing the provincial boundaries also, how well it works. And then the model constraints, the canal constraints related to the constraints of the accord, as well as maybe the reservoir-related information.
Thank you. I imagine this afternoon there will be a group forming with champions who want to discuss that point. Jay, you had?
I like very much what Arif presented and Simon. It's exactly what we are doing now in Kazakhstan. We have a huge event, international event, which calls Kaz Expo. So it's huge technology, sensors, renewable energy, and so on. And it will be good to expand what Arif presented with telemetry. So what we are trying to do now, we try to connect all these sensors to huge pumps. So all the sensors turn off these pumps automatically when water increasing upstream of rivers, and pump water for small areas. And in this case, less amount of water will go to downstream during the flood season. And at the same time, it will keep water during the drought season. We'll keep on small ponds. I think it will be good to expand this cooperation to connect what you do and what we are trying to do, and make these joint technologies available for many areas.
Thank you.
Yes, I am Nawaz from USAID, Pakistan. So about the integrated model that Mubin presented, I think that's excellent work, and that is much needed. The question is that how can this model, the ownership, to ensure the ownership for this, first from WAPDA, other affiliated departments, and second, how can we make it robust so that irrigation departments can also use it for their own purposes. So that would be wonderful if there is acceptability of these models and ownership. And the same is for Dr. Anwar's telemetry system. It's a great system, but the question is how can we take ownership from irrigation departments so that, because technology is a good thing on one hand, but it is also scary when it is new. So how can we make progress to ensure ownership of the departments? Thank you.
Thank you. So again, I'm hearing linking to demand, linking to stakeholders, making it more co-produced.
Thank you. I have some four from the three. First, from information I want from Mr. Simon regarding the different scenario here presented regarding the floods. That the flood will be increasing after 100 years. So, what do you think that these flood due to the heavy rain or the melting of the glacier? Because some of the glacier experts and the global the climate change people, so they're saying that after within 100 years, so the glacier will not be so much, or so there is a. So how you can reconcile this thing that these floods will be getting that? Second, from Mr. Mubin, so very good presentation, and regarding the struggle you are doing for that, so we appreciate that. But as the model you have presented to, you are saying that the results are similar to the IRSA model. Whether you know that the IRSA model, they are providing good results, because we are also providing the water availability for the seasonal water availability for the both the reservoir for the Torbela and Mangla for the Kharif and other crop. So we also check their model also. So would you light on that whether how much, because as per my information we are thinking, so there is a. And third, from my first presenter regarding the technology of the satellite and the acquisition of the data. So whether you show that this satellite data, it's maybe used for the research, but as for the operational purpose, so I think it's not so much, because without any calibration of the data at the specific place. So I think, so these my questions.
Thank you. I saw 6 hands and I've had 5 people, so I'm forgetting somebody. And it was a woman, right? Because we said 2 women.
Behind you, Flip. Behind you.
Oh, had I seen your hand? No, if you're behind me, I can't see it.
I'm Diffid. We focus a lot on what we can glean in terms of collecting data. And we've talked about it earlier today, but how is it used? And also, are we asking the right question? Are we talking about how much more can we get in terms of quantity rather than how well we can use it? An example, yesterday there was a reference by Dr. Ashraf saying that Pakistan now only has 1,000 cubic meters of water per person. And that's true. It's a function of a certain amount of water and a growing population. But that doesn't tell you how well it's being used. And if I can draw a comparison, and I appreciate this may be a little controversial, and it is very much a back of an envelope one, Israel has 125 cubic meters of water per person. But in 2015, it generated a GDP that was larger than Pakistan's. It was $300 billion, and Pakistan was 270. And if you can argue that Israel has roughly, I said this is a back of an envelope, it has 1 billion cubic meters of surface water. Pakistan has approximately 200 billion cubic meters of surface water. And this is not including the groundwater and how valuable that is to the economy. So I think one of the challenges we have is not taking the status quo and saying, how do we begin to look at how we're using water and questioning the returns? Who gets it? Who benefits? If we're running water to grow winter crops, what's the value of those winter crops? Do we need to revisit? So that's sort of one of my observations.
Thank you. For sake of time, I'm going to give it back to the panel. My apologies if your hand was up and I didn't come to you. But as I was saying, after the coffee tea break and after lunch, there will be a lot more interactive scope to take these discussions further. So, Chair, I think I can hand it to you, and if we can keep it to 5 minutes, then we will all be happy that we can go for coffee and tea.
Or I'll just save time and say thank you very much, and we close the session.
Some of the panelists might want to react a little bit, but if they can keep it super crisp, then I will be very happy, and you will also be happy.
Okay, so 1 minute each.
1 minute each. Let me respond to two things. The one on the use of some of the satellite data for more operational applications. Yes, I was largely talking about the use of those data for research type projects. And Hamish made the point that there's an importance of combining those together with ground observations. In the flood forecasting space, I would note though, however, we've just completed very successfully some work in the eastern part of South Asia and the Ganges and Brahmaputra basins, indicating how we can get much improved flood forecasts with lead times of up to 15 days, solely based on remote sensing information through various data assimilation and modelling platforms. And it would be exciting to see those applied in the Indus as well. And a quick response to Anamika, absolutely agree. I can't either wash my hands nor take full responsibility for the design of the program. I think in some ways, perhaps the title of this session was a bit of a misnomer, and I think we've seen some very interesting presentations that I imagine are of interest to many of the people here. But your point about the science policy interface, I think, is very well taken. My own comment would be, I think that this, the journey I described this community having taken and where we're now has very much focused on building a knowledge forum and building a knowledge network amongst knowledge people. And now I think the community has to really think about how does it sensibly engage into that policy space? Does that happen at a national level? Does it happen beyond a national level? And what's the structured way that puts the knowledge that's being shared here into a more synthetic and accessible form, and has as I say, a structured way of communicating that to policymakers. I think as we saw from the show of hands this morning, there were only a small number in the room. If you want to have that conversation, you've got to have a much more balanced group of people. So point well taken, thanks.
So I think, yes, with field level instrumentation and the ability to receive data very rapidly, supervisory controlling pumps and things is the obvious next step. In Pakistan, we have a bit of a challenge with the fact that we have significant problems with electricity and all, that just managing those pumps then is a bit of a challenge. And also, we haven't even really cracked the data acquisition part, let alone the supervisory control. That's clearly the next step, and you seem to be further ahead. Nawaz's comment, I think, is very valid. Technology, whether it's modeling or whether it's hardware that I've been talking about or anything, sort of that transfer to government and to make sure that it remains and it continues to be updated and it is used appropriately from planning through to operation is a challenge. We see a litany of these kind of endeavors from the past, which is why I asked the question, at least on the data acquisition, does government need to procure the hardware for the data, or does the government need to procure the data? And would that solve that problem to some extent? And that's why I asked that question. I think it's something that is worth discussing and debate and exploring further.
Okay, good. I will also start with Nawaz's question. I think it is very relevant, which Arif just mentioned. So the way we designed our project, we basically had a series of discussion with them, trying to understand what are their needs, what kind of modeling frameworks are required by them. And this is the way we try to develop our program over there. So it's pretty much demand driven. And then our entire work which we have done, it is done with close collaboration with WAPDA and all the provincial irrigation department. And we were fortunate enough, they have given us enough time to explain their operational rule. They have shared basically all of their data set, which was required. And this is the way we are developing it. And since it's one of the largest continuous irrigation system, it's a very complex system. Along the way, we really want to make sure that we are capturing the ground realities accurately. And without their help, this was almost impossible to develop these kind of things. And hence, we are going back again with the draft report, with the draft model. And next week, Ministry is planning to organize a meeting with the, all provincial irrigation department and by themselves to go through it, review it. And once this model is, accepted by them, only then we will go into the, next phase, what scenarios they are interested in, how we can use it. So this is the second question which Dr. Riaz has made about the seasonal flow forecast. I fully agree with him that there is a considerable room to improve the forecasting methods in Pakistan. The reason is that, but the first step is that if you have to convince that the model is useful for them, you need to replicate their current processes. So basically, we implemented their methodology to show, yes, we can have the similar forecast according to your procedure in the modeling framework. Along the way, we are doing a separate research, and we are in touch with, Daniel Hashmi as well in particular, and other groups, to improve the seasonal flow forecasting method as well for Pakistan. And once we have that information, we can run the model with its forecast as well as the new method to show them how much difference it makes in terms of the allocation decisions. On the Shakil's point was about, some of the constraints and, the treaty. So basically, this model which I have discussed, it's more on the water apportionment accord within Pakistan between different provinces. So it's not modeling the Indus Water Treaty per se. So it's mostly the water allocation decision, how it is being made within Pakistan. And yes, I mean, it does have the some of the allocation rules. There is a water apportionment accord, which is a simple, you can say 14 paragraph, but the operation details are not written. And then we have consulted the relevant people to capture those operational rules, the system's constraint, and that's what we have implemented, and we are getting reasonable results.
Thank you. For very crisp response by Simon.
Yeah, sure. So let me pick up some points here about demand-driven. So I agree, and what I was trying to do is say, here is some illustration of tools that we've developed, methods that we're showing, and how do they fit in. But I would say on the policy side, I think I would point to 4 frameworks that have been agreed. The Paris Agreement on Climate Change, the Sustainability Agenda 2030, the Addis Ababa Agreement on Development Funding, and the Sendai Agreement on Vulnerability and Adaptability. And I think that's what we're trying to feed into, is that, but how do you do that? And meeting that thing, the interface between SDGs, vulnerability, and adaptation. In terms of transfer of ownership, more than happy that under this Global Environment Facility, we will do capacity strengthening, we will build partnerships, so these models will be embedded. The message model is already being used by India to look at its energy. The community water model is an open source model, and so we will make this available, and we will co-host training workshops. And in terms of uncertainty and robustness, these models, whilst we have a set of in-house models, a lot of our models are ensembles of models. And then the final point about uncertainty in the floods, we looked at a range of climate models, a range of hydrological models, and a range of scenario development. And the biggest uncertainty actually comes from the hydrological models. So again, if we were to think about uncertainty, it was again improving those hydrological models. And again, I can point you to that reference that's available in the peer-reviewed journal.
Thank you. And finally, Harmish.
Yeah, I just pick up on the question about policy relevance. In my presentation, I talked about the dollar values of the water supply at the Tarbella. That was the $250 million at one dam. And about the lives supported, the 70 million in the basin. And also about the threats to government, the droughts, threats to government and society that droughts pose. And I think as a scientist, that's about as far as I can go with policy relevance. If that doesn't interest the policymakers, then there's not very much I can do. So I think I went as far as I'm comfortable going and reasonably go as a scientist. And I have to hand over.
Okay. Thank you all panel members. I will just make one final remark. One very exciting development that is taking place in remote sensing is measurement of river flow by using satellite data. And there are considerable progress in these techniques, and I hope within next few years there may be some operational models which make use of this data so that some of the limitations of instrumented measurement data can be overcome. With that, I hand over back to Alan.
Thank you, Chair. So some news, ladies and gentlemen. Hashtag Indus Basin is trending. So keep on tweeting, everyone. And I think that's important. You're on live streaming. So we're hoping to continue the live streaming. We don't have thousands of people out there watching, but there are between 0 and 100 online watching us, right? And they're informed by this debate. So let's greet them. Thank you for being out there. And let's encourage more people to join. There's a vote. So go to your Mojot website, web link, please. There's a vote on the Science Policy Research Interface. And you have a chance now to make an impact on our own data environment here by voting. It's a very simple one. I think 26 people have voted so far. How would you describe the science/knowledge policy/decision-making relationship in the Indus Basin? Strong and stable. For those Brits in the room, cringe-making idea of strong and stable relationship. Evolving, but not there yet. Just about okay. Weak and volatile or non-existent. Right? So remember, this is our own co-production of knowledge. Please vote. Okay, now, all the presentations we want to put online, but we understand some of you may want to make some adjustments to your presentations. So the event website will hold all those presentations. So rather than trying to get all the sticks and put them in your computers, etc., find them online. But if you do have an issue, you don't want to put it online, please tell us, because the default position will be it goes online. So if you want to make a change, an adjustment, do it before it goes online, right? So just don't talk to me, but talk to the table over there about that. Or you can talk to me about it, I don't mind. But I would direct you to that table over there. So, okay, field visit tomorrow. We absolutely have to have the numbers, otherwise people may end up by hitching a ride or getting in a three-wheeler or something, and it's a long way. It's quite a drive. So we need to know who's coming. Please tell the admin people outside on the table on the left if you are coming. We need to know the numbers. Okay. And I think that's it. So we'll continue on till about 12:10, 20-minute tea break. Then we'll come back for a very interesting interactive session. Please do come back. Enjoy your tea and coffee.
Then you can start to fill in the